So one of the biggest news stories from the Premier League football this weekend was undoubtedly on Monday night when Crystal Palace well and truly humiliated a Manchester United side that have gone through all sorts of problems this season, sparking fresh debates over Erik ten Hag's future at the club. But while the rest of the internet talks about Man United and Erik ten Hag and that never-ending story, we wanted to actually shine a light on Crystal Palace, who kind of flew under the radar a little bit since Oliver Glasner came in for Roy Hodgson about 11 or 10 games ago. And actually, which I'll throw up now on the screen, actually, if you take a look at the Premier League table, since Oliver Glasner arrived at the club, they've actually been sitting 6th in the table. Only Arsenal, Man City, Liverpool, Chelsea and Newcastle have more points than Glasner's Palace, who are above Aston Villa in 7th, then Bournemouth, Fulham and then Everton in 10th. Ewan, I want to throw this to you first because you watched the game, you took it in. I mean, would we say this is a bit of a surprise result considering the way that both teams have been playing, or is this kind of what we, and maybe Palace fans, should now come to expect from Oliver Glasner and this team?
I don't think it was a surprise result at all. I think Crystal Palace went into the game as favourites to get the 3 points given their form, and Manchester United's form, which is completely different. I think Ashley Young said on Monday Night Football that it was men against boys, but I think it was actually men against pensioners, because United's team had no athleticism, whereas Crystal Palace's team was full of energy, dynamic running, and also quality in the ball. Obviously, people look at the two players, and Eze and Olise, the two stars of the show, but Will Hughes was outstanding last night. I think Adam Wharton's been an unbelievable signing since coming in from Blackburn. I remember writing about him in December before the move. I'm surprised that Crystal Palace managed to get him over other top clubs, because I think he's a player that in 2-3 years' time we'll be playing for a top 4 club. He's an outstanding player. Glasner's had a transformative effect, not just kind of on results, but also the style of football, which was like one criticism that was aimed at Roy Hodgson. Defensively, Palace were pretty good under Hodgson, but they weren't great in attack and they were a little bit boring to watch at times. But Glasner's came in with a good CV from his time in Germany, and he's been brilliant. They're flying, and they could obviously match their kind of records point total in the Premier League by the end of the season.
Yeah, Ben, I'll throw this back to you because you actually wrote a piece for Transfermarkt on Tuesday morning looking at Michael Olise's stats this season, how well he's doing. And it's not just a case that he's doing well for Crystal Palace, but he's actually doing well when you compare him to the rest of the wingers in the Premier League, isn't he?
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'd like to touch on Glasner as well, because I've been really impressed at how he's brought the best out of him. So he's taken 18 points from 11 games. I think it's been really intelligent, the formation they set up. So they played wing-backs. And if you watched Olise and Eze, they've rarely played together because they've both had their injury problems. But when they have played previously under Hodgson, it's normally been in a 4-3-3, particularly for Olise, who's played very wide. He's only had chalk on his boots. He's hugging that touchline. Whereas now, Glasner is pushing the wing-backs on in Munoz and Mitchell, and then Eze and Olise are playing much closer, much more central, and picking up the ball in dangerous areas, and they got numerous chances from it last night. And Olise obviously got 2 goals. In the 3 games under Glasner, where both Olise and Eze have started for Palace, they've won 5-2 against Newcastle, 4-0 against Man United last night, and 1-0 away at Liverpool. In those games, between Olise and Eze, they scored 5 goals in those 3 games. So I think when he has them fit, this is a really dynamic, exciting Palace team, obviously headed by Mateta, who's in great form up front as well. Michael Olise is an incredible player, and there's no doubt there's going to be a lot of clubs interested in him this summer. He has this new release clause after signing a new contract for around 70 million euros. Newcastle are the latest club to be heavily linked with him. Arsenal, Manchester United, PSG, and Chelsea have also been rumoured to be interested this season. I think it's going to be a real challenge for Crystal Palace to keep Eze and Olise this summer. But if they can, they've got a hell of a team. And I really think if they can keep those two with Adam Wharton in the middle, Mateta now looking confident up front, they could potentially be challenging for the European places next season. I wrote, as you mentioned, I wrote a piece about Olise on the Transfermarkt website today. If we look at goals per 90 minutes this season, he's actually second among all wingers in the Premier League. He's only behind Cole Palmer. And Cole Palmer's obviously scored 9 penalties as well. So if you take that away, it's incredible statistics from Olise. But he has only started 12 Premier League games this season. Persistent hamstring injuries have meant he's missed a lot of football. And very rarely have we seen him and Eze start together for Crystal Palace. And in that goals per 90 thing, he's ahead of Phil Foden, Mohamed Salah and Bukayo Saka. He also, when we look at the statistics for shots per 90 minute, he's 5th in the entire Premier League. Dribbles per 90 minute, he's 5th in the entire Premier League. He's got the 4th best dribble percentage success rate in the Premier League. And also, we can look at stats as much as we like, but let's look at the eye test. What a player to watch. Last night, every time he picked up the ball, he gets you off his seat. For that first goal, when he put Casemiro on his backside, that is what you love to watch as a footballer. He's got quick feet. He's always direct. He very rarely picks up the ball and just passes it back to the fullback or back to the centre mid. He wants to get at players. He's a really, really exciting player. And Crystal Palace would do a great job if they're able to keep him this summer.
Yeah, really comprehensive breakdown there of his stats and his performances in this season. I'm quite intrigued by the way that how this kind of all impacts not only Glasner's arrival at the club, but how Crystal Palace go from here, because looking back at how well Glasner did at Eintracht Frankfurt, he was kind of famed for being this really impressive tactician. He could create very specific systems built around very specific players. Of course, players came and gone, as is the nature of football, especially in German football. But we remember that kind of run that they had to the Europa League final, where they obviously won the competition. In the Bundesliga themselves, they were very kind of Jekyll and Hyde when it came to like home and away form, because he was very set up specifically for home games as opposed to away games. And we've already kind of seen this at Crystal Palace, where, as Ben says, he's putting together this fantastic kind of formation around Palace's key players. The kind of big what if, or the elephant in the room here, is what happens if Palace are forced to sell these players, not really through financial means, but just because these players have decided that they want to move on. Do you think that's a concern that Palace have to consider when they maybe are trying to now weigh up their ambitions for next season? Or do you think guys like the ones that Ben have just spoke about there will maybe take a second look at their situation at Palace and say, well, we've got this new head coach, he's winning games for us, we're flying up the league table, maybe next season we can take a shot at Europe, top half of the table, certainly. I mean, we did check before we came on air here. I think the highest Palace has been since they got promoted back in 2013 is 10th. Although they're only 6 points off their highest point tally since then in the league as well. So they're more or less doing exactly as you'd expect them to do. But do you think, I guess my question here is, do you think Palace can keep these players? And as a result, do you think Glasner can then kind of build on that and go even higher next season?
That'll be the big talking point in the summer, won't it? Whether they can keep these players. I think they've got 3 main assets in Eze, Mark Gahey, and obviously Olise. I think all 3 are ready for a move. I think all 3 are good enough to go and play for bigger clubs, and it's just a case of what happens in the summer. If they've got release clauses in their contract, which I think Olise does, and I'm not sure if Eze does or not, but top clubs are going to pay that, and then it comes down to the player. What you would say is obviously Olise had the chance to leave last summer to Chelsea, he chose to stay, but now I think if his performances since he came back in the side and being fit, I think he'll be off in the summer. I can see all 3 of them leaving Palace in the summer, but then conversely that will give the new manager a pretty big transfer kitty which he can reinvest into, bring in players that he wants and form his own side, which he probably didn't have that spending power in the Bundesliga at Frankfurt that he will have if he can sell those players. So I think Palace have recruited well. We talked about Wharton in January, so there's no reason why they can't then bring in good players. Obviously being in London's very attractive in terms of recruitment. Players want to live in London, so I don't think it's a disaster if all those players leave in the summer. It's not ideal because it's your 3 best players. But every club in the world, bar 2, 3, 4, or 5, are selling clubs realistically. So I think they'll expect those players to depart at some point.
Yeah, Ben, I'll throw this to you as well before we wrap up, and I'll add the extra kind of caveat that at his last 2 clubs, Oliver Glasner at Frankfurt and Wolfsburg before that, he did leave the clubs under a kind of cloud of angst or drama based on transfer activities from the clubs, players getting sold he didn't want to move on, or club not spending enough money to bring in new players. So I guess we have to take that into account as well. I'm not saying that Glasner's going to walk out the job 6 months after taking it on, but you'd imagine that he probably took on that job, and one of the first questions he would have said on day one, or even before he did accept it, was, I need to know which players we're keeping and which players we're selling in the summer. And do you think, particularly maybe Michael Olise, who you obviously focused on this week, do you think maybe something like his injury concerns over the last 2 seasons, I've got it in front of me here, 8 games this season, 13 last season that he missed through injury, do you think something like that could hold him back from a big move, or perhaps might make him want to stay and think, I want to do 1 full season at least at Palace before I do kind of make the next step up?
Yeah, I think that's the one saving grace in terms of something to put off big clubs activating that release clause and signing Michael Olise. this summer. More and more often now, big clubs are looking to sign players with good injury records. It's so important now. Like we've seen this season, it can really derail seasons. Like look at the injuries Man United have had. Not saying they would have pulled up trees if they hadn't had those injuries, but it's obviously played a huge part. I just think it's a bit of a difficulty for Palace in terms of Olise. I presume when he signed that new contract last summer, because let's not forget he had a €35 million release clause last summer, and Chelsea activated that before he signed that new contract. I presume there was maybe some sort of conversation saying, okay, I'll stay and do one more season at Crystal Palace, but then I want to go for however much next season. His injuries, though, he hasn't played enough football this season, and maybe for his personal development, he might want to stay one more season at Crystal Palace and push on, get through a 38-game season and play, 35 games or whatever, see what statistics he can get there, and then if he can continue performing the way he has when he has been fit this season, I think the world will be at his feet. I think with Eze, he's a little bit older. I think he's 26 now, and I think it's probably getting to the point now where he feels, he's going into his prime. Now is probably the time to move on. Guehi's a little bit younger as well. I think Palace have probably got more chance of keeping Guehi and Olise this summer than Eze. So if they had to get rid of one, and that's the conversation they're having around the club, maybe Eze would be the one to go. But Olise also is going to be difficult to keep. But yeah, if they can keep them, what a squad Crystal Palace have got as well. We're not even mentioning players like Joachim Andersen. He's been one of the top centre-backs in the Premier League for a few years now. Wharton in the middle. Will Hughes has been much better this season, and Mateta up front. So yeah, if they can keep them together, I really do think they could be charging for Europe next season.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Obviously, if Palace fans, if you're watching, let us know what you think in the comments below. Do you think some of these players might be sold? Do you think they'll be tempted to stick around under the Oliver Glasner revolution at Palace? And of course, let us know where you think you guys will finish next season. Do you think you can push on, even maybe make a stab for European football? Let us know in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and we'll speak to you guys soon.